You know, I'm right. The podcast that uncovers the origin stories of some of the biggest names in sports, news, and entertainment. Nick Durst here with Joe Calabrese and Joe. I'm excited for our guest today. We've had a lot of his colleagues on throughout the industry. But if you're watching this, the YouTube version here, I'm a little taken back because I've never seen him not in a suit before, in the casual look. But why don't you tell everybody who we have with us today?
Yeah, so he's somebody who's bounced around the area a little bit. We're going to be adding to our SNY catalog, but before then, he's had stops at the Miami Herald. He's just had stops at Newsday, and he's had a stop at the New York Daily News. So we're very happy to have him on. Anthony McCarron. Anthony, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you? And thank you for having me.
We're doing well. I wanted to ask you about a recent new nickname you got on air, Mac Daddy. How do you feel about that nickname you got?
I'm fine with it. You know, when I covered baseball at the Daily News, sometimes that would get dropped in, from some of my press box pals. They would. Sometimes it's mackerel also. I mean, when your last name has an M small c, you are pretty much susceptible to any sort of Mac, derivative. Anything is going to come up at some point, and I like them all. I think Mac Daddy is kind of hilarious as well. But yeah, it's there's a million of them.
I have to ask you: are you a Windows guy or a PC guy or a Mac guy?
I am a Mac guy. I have a Mac. Is that a point of contention between you two?
No,
you two guys? No,
definitely not. Just had to ask you because it's a birthright, I guess, with your name there. So
right. Oh, that's true. I didn't even think of it that way.
It's Mac. So I mean, obviously now your laptop is crucial for you to write and everything and doing these Zooms. But for you growing up, what made you want to essentially get into sports journalism and in a broader oversight here? How different is things from, let's say, the 90s to now when it comes to writing stuff?
Yeah, well, I'll start origin story style. I grew up. I lived in New York City until I was 11, and then my family moved to Florida. And the whole time, and in both places, I was an enormous sports fan, primarily baseball. I just loved it. Gobbled up anything I could read about it. Book after book about baseball. The sport, in the garage because I was just, I couldn't bear to throw these precious items away, even after I had read them 2 or 3 times, and, didn't matter. And I could turn to one of the stories in Baseball Digest and, go chapter and verse on Gary Templeton and, what that feature story about him was all about, or whoever. So, that's really, all my life I've been a huge sports guy. And, I liked to write in school, and that was fun. And, when I was in college, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I did some work at the college newspaper and, enjoyed that. And, I always felt that it was a way to keep me around sports, and the writing part was a bonus. And it really, it has my dad told me that the famous saying, if you find something that you love to do, you'll never work a day in your life. And I'm not going to sit here and say that, being a sports writer and a sports journalist isn't work, because it is, of course. But a lot of times, you have that soft landing of your office view being a baseball field. And, that's that for the most part, it has all of, look, this, these gigs have their jobby parts too, and there are bosses and all that stuff. But sometimes there's something right about writing about what the team did or didn't do, or how they could have done it differently, or why did they acquire this guy or that guy. So there's always interesting challenges.
Yeah. So what college did you attend?
I went to Davidson College in North Carolina, made extra famous by Steph Curry.
Right,
Yeah.
of course.
You must love that tournament run back then.
Oh, it was great. It was great. Yeah, I mean, that was that tournament run like sort of reconnected me to school. Because my friends and I were all going nuts over it. It was amazing. And he actually, I just read a story about him in the Charlotte Observer that he just got his early, so even as he's been one of the NBA's, best and brightest players, he got all his credits done, and they actually had like a cutout of him in a chair at the commencement ceremony last weekend. So that was pretty cool, kind of a neat story.
Yeah, didn't somebody else recently do that? Was it Jerome Bettis? I'm thinking another
Yes, I
athlete.
think
It was
I
Jerome
think
Bettis,
you're right.
right?
I think he did. I think he was at his graduation ceremony. But yeah, I think he did go back and get his degree, which is, I mean, that's a great, I'm a softie for those kind of stories.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you're seeing more athletes more and more kind of leave and then realize, okay, fulfilled my professional obligations. Now I go back, finish my education, and figure out what I'm going to do with that with the next chapter in my life.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. Absolutely.
so,
It's
well,
invaluable.
yeah, no, I totally agree. So we're gonna go to the next chapter in your life. So you went to Davidson. What kind of internships did you do when you were at school? And then how did that ultimately lead you into your first job? Because the first job in this industry is ultimately very hard to do as well.
Yes, I wish I could report that I was a conscientious college student who was pursuing all these awesome internships. I see some of these folks who have internships now at incredible papers like the Boston Globe, and they must get such a huge leg up in the industry doing that, and it's amazing. I was not that I was not that student, unfortunately. I had a little, I was not 100% sure what I wanted to do. And, college, I was graduating college and I still wasn't sure. And, ultimately I was able to use through a friend of mine from college had a job at a small newspaper in a town called Greenwood, South Carolina, at the Greenwood Index Journal. And he called me, months after we graduated. I think I was working at a record store, which might be an unfamiliar term to some of the younger. And I said, okay, well, I'll come up there and see what it's all about. I ended up getting the job, and I spent almost 2 years there. The first year of it was as a news reporter, which was, it was a great education. I was taking the pictures, the photos that went along with the stories. I was responsible for those. I could never do it now, but I was even taught how to develop them. I mean, this is this is pre-digital age, so I wasn't uploading to a computer. I was in the dark room, mixing the chemicals and everything like some sort of a med and totally unqualified scientist. That was my first job, and while I was there, I got to start doing sports. High school football was enormous in this town. They had a really good team. So Friday night football was huge there. I mean, they had a giant stadium. Everybody, the town was always interested in what Greenwood High was doing, and indeed the rest of the surrounding smaller high schools as well. And the paper covered them all, so I got to get in on that a little. And then I eventually moved over into the sports department and started doing that full time. And which was great. I mean, it was, I was a history major in college, so I didn't have any reporting classes per se. So this was my lab to learn how to do it and make, all the mistakes in the world, which I did, and ask all the dumb questions. And they're, look, I mean, everybody asks silly questions, even later in their career for sure. So to learn how to present a story, what's important, what's not, how to dig a little bit more. So it was great. I mean, I wasn't crazy about small town living in the South, and that ultimately prompted me to try to move on. But it was the education I got there was tremendous, and I just learned so much about the business, and I ended up going to Northwestern to get a master's in Greenwood.
So at the top, I mentioned you started working at the Miami Herald and eventually you moved on to Newsday, right? So evidently that means that you found your way back to Florida and then you found your way back home.
Yes.
So how did the Miami Herald opportunity happen for you? How was that like? And ultimately, how did that lead into your transition to moving back home to your real home, New York City, when you after you moved away when you were 11?
Well, I got the job at the Herald after my the Northwestern master's program is 1 calendar year. So after that, I was back home in Florida living with my mom and dad, and I trying to get a job somewhere, and a part-time opportunity opened up at the Herald, and I was lucky enough to get it, and it was in the Fort Lauderdale bureau, because the Herald is obviously based in Miami. And but they were trying to get readers in Broward County too, not just Dade County. So they covered all the Broward County high school sports. They had one full-time reporter who did it, and then a few part-timers who were involved as well. And a lot of it was, clerk kind of work where I would, pick up the phone. Okay, coach, how did the game go? And you're typing away in the computer, and so and so, had 26 points and 12 rebounds, and so made a steal at the buzzer to ice the win. So it was that kind of stuff. And then you'd occasionally get thrown out to stories as well, which was always great because, there were tremendous athletes down there and big time football, big time basketball, big time baseball. So that was a lot of fun. And I did that for a couple of years because I just, any opportunity that they were willing to give me, I would take. I wrote like feature stories they had these zoned parts of the paper that would go to different counties or whatever, or different bigger urban areas still in the Broward area. Stories for them, and that was kind of a freelance side hustle for those things. But that was what a lot of it was at that time. Trying to get assignments there. Since I was a part-timer, you're trying to supplement with any freelance you can do as well. I mean, I covered I covered the Orange Bowl for a couple of years for a paper in Nebraska on a freelance basis because Nebraska was in it like twice, I think, in a row. And
Right.
I would cover the whole run up for them, going to the press conferences and then the game, and they would send their writer too, but they would expand their coverage because obviously it was such a big deal. But yeah, so they at one point I had a very impressive collection of media gift. They used to give away bags like work bags, shoulder bags or whatever. I had like 3 consecutive Orange Bowl years of the shoulder bag. It was crazy, but really fun. And you're just at that point you're just trying to get everything you can, get anything you can.
Yeah, and it's you're covering a big game like that and getting those swag bags, and
Yeah.
can't beat that. So from there, how did you ultimately end up with Newsday?
Well, I didn't feel like I was going to get a full-time shot at the Herald, and it was at the time my parents wanted to move back to New York, and and at that point I said, this was 1994, so I had been at the Herald for 2 years, or roughly 2 years at that point, maybe not quite, and I just said, what, I've always wanted to, live back in the city as an adult, so I said I'm gonna do it, and I got lucky to get a part-time, basically the same kind of job I had at the Miami Herald. I got at Newsday in Newsday's Queens office, doing kind of the same thing I did at the Herald, and taking scores over the phone, clerk stuff, and then hustling up stories, writing for their borough pull-out sections too. Going trying to find stories, to write for the book section. That was kind of that, and then the Daily News expanding. They had moved some of they had 5 people who covered high school, and at the time, and they kind of, which I mean sounds crazy today because it's not the same climate, but they were moving them up on the food chain, and they were looking to hire people, so they hired a couple of people who worked at Newsday, and I was lucky to be the last one of those, I think it was, to get in on that, and and I spent 21 years at the Daily News.
So with the Daily News, ultimately in 1999, you're breaking in as a baseball reporter, which was originally your major love there. So
Right.
how did that opportunity come about for you? Because you're grinding away for all these years, now you're finally becoming what you wanted to be, a baseball reporter.
Right. Well, when we covered high schools there at the News, which I did for 3 years, the summer was relaxed for us because there wasn't, school's not in session. You did some stuff because like basketball recruiting was so big and there's all these summer camps and stuff. So you did go out to those and talk to the big name recruits, the Stephon Marburys of the world and all that sort of stuff. Um, but there were opportunities, I volunteered to do baseball games if they needed spare people. And there were, this is when they would send 4 or 5 people to a baseball game, especially if it was Yankees Red Sox. They'd have the
Right.
guy, they'd have a columnist or maybe 2 columnists, they'd have the main beat writer, and then they'd have, maybe 1 or 2 sidebar writers. So I volunteered to do as many sidebars as I could. And, by 1999, that became pretty regular. Actually, there's a stop in between there because my actual first pro beat was the Islanders.
Wow.
I did the 98-99 season, and then I did half of 99 2000 because I moved to the Yankee beat in 2000 to take that over. But yeah, I had hockey writing. High schools, the summers were clear. So, I was volunteering to get into baseball as much as possible.
How challenging is it for you to go from one beat to the other in different sports? And do you think now, where you currently are, if someone was like, "Hey, Anthony, we need you to cover this football event, or can you do some hockey coverage?" Would you be able to do it?
It's funny you mention hockey because I'll be at the Rangers game on Sunday at the Garden. I'm gonna write for the website for SNY actually. So I mean it's challenging because I don't follow it in the same way that I follow baseball because that's my primary focus. But in those days, when you're on staff at a newspaper, you sort of have to be flexible and you have to be versatile if you want to, or at least you have to say to the people who make the decisions, "Oh, I can do that, sure.
Yeah.
Hockey, no problem. Yeah, I got it." And then you back home and you're reading everything you can find on it and asking any of your puckhead friends to go down the list of forechecking, back checking, everything, so you get up to speed. But yeah, it is challenging, and you do have to do your homework. And but when I did get the Yankee beat, I felt like I was in a great place because I knew the game, and loved it, and so I thought that part would be, I wouldn't have to force myself to read about it or think about it or talk about it. The hard part is reporting it because that's a hyper competitive beat with, some of the best people who, are working in sports anywhere. And they're all getting great stories. They all have good sources. They've all done a great job of cultivating people and they have a keen eye to notice stuff because of course the club is not telling you everything that's going on, but some of it is laid bare for you to see on the field, in the clubhouse, whatever. And they had trained eyes, developed eyes that I certainly did. In 2000, I mean, that was an enormous beat, very important. The front of the paper cared about the Yankees. When I covered the Islanders there, I was the only person who really cared about the Islanders. They were terrible at the time, and so I would be my nerdy self out at practice on Long Island, and I'd call in, "Hey, I've got a story about the plucky winger who scored 4 goals in the last 5 games. How he's really turning his season around." And they'd be like, "We don't have room." Boom. And that's the old hang up motion, pre-cell phone days. But now it's like, now I would, when I was doing the Yankees, I'd call in and I'd say, "Okay, I have this," and they'd say, "Okay, what else?" And I'd say, "Okay, I could do this," and they'd say, "Well, do you have anything else?" And I'd say, "Well, I could do this." "Okay, and then what about a notebook?" So all of us, so it's laser focused. Everybody's into it. but that's great because you're getting read. It's on the back page all the time, and that's a place that you want to be, in your career if you work at a tabloid. So, it was a definite learning experience, but incredible.
Yeah, so I was going to ask briefly, at the peak of their at the peak of the last great baseball dynasty, right? How much was of a grind was it? Because getting to the ballpark, getting there, setting up shop, being involved in all those postseason games from that run. I mean, it must have took a toll on you, right?
Yes, it's exhausting, and I'm not sure that I knew that it was going to be like that. But at the time, you're so charged up on adrenaline that you don't realize it until I remember being exhausted after seasons, like exhausted. I remember after the 2001 World Series, the Yankees had played in the playoffs and obviously made the World Series, but every opponent was a West Coast opponent. So we were flying back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So at the end, I had like, I don't know what it was, the flu or games to the Diamondbacks in 2001. And we come home, I call my boss, I've got like 104 fever. And I say, look, I'm not doing any off-season stuff today. I can't, I gotta be in bed. Oh, okay. So I hang up the phone, go back to sleep. 2 hours later, that in those days you could go to the stadium and the players were cleaning out their lockers, and you could get into the clubhouse to talk to them about what went right, what went wrong during the season. Hey, your contract's up. Are you going to resign here, or are you going to sign with your hometown team in Texas or whatever? So I was not going to the ballpark that day. So I'm snoozing away, trying to get better. 2 hours later, the phone rings. I know you're not going to the ballpark today, but are you making calls? And I'm like, well, no, I'm asleep, So, but that's the way that beat was at the time. And it is, you're right. I mean, grind is a perfect word for it because, I always got the impression that there were people in the newspaper business who didn't do that job, who thought that their commute was comparable to the commute of someone covering a Major League Baseball team, which of course is insanity because I flew from Chicago to Seattle that morning on the first flight and, in the middle of this long road trip, and then I got to go cover a game, and there's no off day coming up on Saturday, because they have another game. So it was, and that some people who cover the beat are like sort of built for that grind and the lifestyle, and they can do it, but it wore me out, I'll tell you.
So obviously 2004, tough pill to swallow for Yankee fans like Joe, but for you as a writer, I mean, how like incredible was that to be able to write that story as it unfolded when they collapsed to the Red Sox?
That was one thing that those Yankees, and they've really always been good at this, but they always generated fascinating things to write about, and they leading 3-0, and the way it all happened, and the fact that that rivalry was at such a fever pitch at the time, and there was real heat between the two teams. There was certainly real heat between the organizations, the front office people, and obviously the fans. So for that to happen, against the backdrop of fights in the past and bad blood, all that stuff, it really was amazing. I mean, you're lucky as a reporter to get in on these kind of stories. They don't happen all the time. I mean, so many seasons end and they're just nondescript seasons where some team, maybe not in New York, but some team that you cover is 79 and 83, and everybody's glad the season is over. They love baseball, but they're, it's a big shrug. And, the Yankees were never a shrug. The whole time that I wrote about them on a daily basis, they were never a shrug. They always had something going on, always had some incredible thing happening, and that collapse was part of it.
That was definitely a major moment in baseball history.
Yeah.
Another big moment. I'm guessing you were in the stadium for this, but what was going through your mind when Roger Clemens was in George Steinbrenner's box.
I was there that day.
How did you go about tackling that story post game?
Well, that was, it's funny because we were, that was obviously crazy and, and a treat because that's, that fits right in with the Yankee MO. They love a show and they know how to put one on. So I actually remember vividly, we went down to the clubhouse, did the interviews, whatever we got off of that, which are not very memorable. I can't pick it out. But one detail that I could pick out, and I think I led my story with it, was that when I got upstairs to the press box and I'm sitting down to write, look out, and Clemens was throwing in the bullpen. A great visual to start the story with.
Oh yeah, for sure. Now, when you're with the Daily News later at the end of your tenure there, obviously social media explodes. So how did you balance between, okay, I got to get this story up on the website or out in the paper versus I need to tweet this out right now so I can be first getting credit for it?
Right. That's a very interesting question, and it harkens back to what you guys asked at the beginning. How things have changed. When I first started doing it, we had a thing called, you went and got the papers every day. So you had that moment at the newsstand. Like before you went to bed, you didn't know if somebody had a big story, a competitor had a big story. There were two ways you could find out: a way too early call from one of your bosses. Did you see the Post? Or you could go to the newsstand yourself. And I distinctly remember, I don't remember what the story was, but I remember walking up to a newsstand and seeing Tino Martinez on the back of the Post, I think it was. And there was no reason why Tino should have been on the back of the Post. And I was just like, oh no. And, they had gotten a good story or whatever it was. And, but that was like, the dread of going to the newsstand. Which is now replaced by something pops up on Twitter and it's like, oh, look at that. They traded for so-and-so. We got to work on that story. It's a different kind of thing. And you're right. I mean, newspapers historically, newspapers have struggled with the internet because they gave it away for free. A lot of them gave away the content for free early on in the explosion of the internet, because I remember distinctly being told that it was a great advertising tool for the paper product, because no one could conceive that the paper product would ever disappear or would ever be marginalized in the way that it probably has nowadays. So if we had started charging everybody a nickel for every but of course that wasn't the case. So early on, they wanted you to get stuff up on the web, so you could possibly say you had it first. They wanted, or they just wanted to get the news up there. So if there was a trade, you could say, that so and so was traded for Anthony McCarron. McCarron had 24 home runs last year. Blah blah blah. Just put up a little thing, and then you would write your more in-depth piece with interviews and whatever later on, and that would replace it, and that would be the one that would go in the paper the next day. But the idea of tweeting news, because you're basically like alerting everyone else that does your job, that you compete with, that you have this story, that it's out there, that this trade has been made, you found out first, either by luck or by hard work, and now they're in on it too. And so you had to, I remember they wanted us to at one point write the story first before you tweet it, so when you tweet it, it has a link so they can go to the website. And but of course, when you're writing the story, somebody else could catch you, tweet it, and then they're like, oh yeah, according to the penny saver, Jason Giambi is going to be traded or whatever. And so it was a crazy time. I was not on the beat when social media was a thing and when it exploded. So I wasn't somebody who had to had to blog a whole lot. I did some, when that was a thing, and so I didn't have to, the social media responsibilities didn't weigh heavily on me at that time. And then everything sort of changed, going forward. And now, people are covering the team on Twitter. and that might be it. And that's, there's, I don't know, there's call for that. There's a market for it.
Anthony McCarron, 24 home runs, huh?
Yeah. Yeah. I think
So
I undersold myself.
So Nick and I have our softball team tonight, our Wednesday night softball match, and we could use a power hitter in the middle of the lineup.
Oh man.
Could
How are
use
you?
some more help.
Are you guys a good team?
Yeah, I mean, last year we went to the championship game, but we
Nice.
got destroyed because they moved us up a division because we were too good. So we ended up losing in the championship.
Ah,
So
I
we're
know
out
there's
for
some
some
serious
redemption.
softball players.
Yeah, we gotta try to get some of these some of these SNY people, these former athletes, to come join us. Every time we get on somebody from like MLB Network, they're like, you in the area,
Yeah,
you want to
right.
come down?
Right. Carlos Pena, you want to play? Mark DeRosa?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Once upon a time, Carlos Pena reached out to us and kind of teased it a little bit, so that possibility is still out in the universe.
Oh,
Yeah.
he's a really nice guy, isn't he? Yeah, Carlos.
Yeah.
And he was a really good player too.
Yeah.
He was a great power hitter too.
Yeah,
Rays.
absolutely. Yeah, yeah.
The Rays back on course. Anthony, for you, what was your kind of ballpark routine? Or when you still go, what time are you getting there? And then an important question I always like to ask people who are writing baseball: what are you doing? Like, as far as, are you eating before the game? Are you snacking during the game? How are you staying energized? Because what people don't realize is if this game's going 16 innings, you guys are sitting there the whole time too, writing that. So what's your kind of daily routine there?
Well, I learned the hard way that you have to get to the ballpark early. I feel like in that job, you can't control what the other media covering the team, gets for their story. You can't control, getting the interview you want, because ultimately, you have to ask the player or whoever, and they have to agree to it, and all that stuff. Sometimes it doesn't happen. So the one thing you can control there is being on time, because and that gives you the opportunity, and this may sound like something small, but it means that you cover this base of being able to have your eyes on the club, on the injured list for the last 2 months. Well, he's throwing in the bullpen now, and you can see that. If you showed up a little late, you might not see that. I remember that I made that mistake a couple times where I would miss stuff because on a Sunday, it's, if you cover a Saturday night game, it's difficult to get there at the appointed time on Sunday because, whatever. But you can miss your opportunity to talk to a guy who might be a newsmaker of the day. You can miss your opportunity to see something. So I always left ridiculously early to get there and set up. And you have a few moments of peace, nice baseball field as your vista, and that's good. And then as far as the eating goes, like I had to eat many a dinner while like this, typing, eating, there, or but most days there's a break after you're done, covering the team, after they're done taking batting practice, and you can come upstairs and eat in the press dining room or grab something from one of the concessions if that's your thing. And you can, sort of exhale a little bit.
What stadium would you say had the best press dining?
Oh man, that's a tough one. Kansas City was always good. I haven't been there in a long time, but they always had good barbecue there because
Yep.
yeah, they were very obviously that town is very proud of their excellent barbecue, rightfully so, having consumed vast quantities of it over the years, including being out there for the World Series in 2015, which was great. So I'd say that's probably one of them. Sometimes depending on the club's mood toward the media, I think that impacts it, or if they have changes in some of them go up and down. Like I remember Boston used to go up and down a lot. Like one year they would be be like, well, you got to go to the concession stand, and then the next year you'd come back and it was great, and you're like, this is phenomenal. I'm glad we come here. For sure.
Yeah. and I guess it just depends on how the team's doing or what the market price is and stuff. So you never know. But SNY launches. So your company, they get their own show, Daily News Live, with the great Joe Beningo and
Yeah.
originally Chris Cotter and then Jonas Schwartz. And then, a bunch of you and your colleagues end up coming in. So when you were approached with that opportunity, what was your initial reaction there? Because you're obviously coming from a writing background, and now they're like, hey, let's throw you on TV.
Well, I mean, it was exciting to be honest with you, because it's something new and different and fun. I mean, that's the way I always looked at it, was that the times, and I had at the beginning, I kind of had everybody got a chance early on, and then later you kind of did or didn't, and so I had a couple of runs where I went a while without being on, and you know, and I'm sure that part of it was me getting used to being on TV, because it's, while you go into it, thinking, hey, fun, the red light comes on and you're like, I'm on television,
Yeah.
and they're like, look into the camera, and you're like, look into the camera, and it's, so it can be nerve wracking. And, but it was, I looked at it as like, look, I have no idea if I could ever do anything in that part of it. I should just have fun with it. I mean, SNY, when Daily News Live was a thing, and some of the other shows they've created. I mean, I'm on Baseball Night in New York now, and that show is a treat. It's so much fun to be on it. They always fostered for that show, and then and dear departed Daily News Live, the sizzle of a good sports conversation. There was camaraderie, there were arguments,
Yep.
there were debate topics, different points of view. So like I always tried to just
So one of my favorite segments on SNY, it has to be when you and John Harper are on Sports Night. I mean, you guys are going at it, exploding. Obviously, you guys worked together for a long time. You should probably get your own digital show at least. But do you feel like with certain people that you're working with, you really have to up it and bring your A game to go back and forth with them?
Yeah, I mean, with Harp and I have a natural kinship, because we did, we were at the Daily News together for so long. We have some key things that we agree and disagree on. We both love baseball, and so it is always a thrill to be on with John, because I think he's really good on TV, and he's a really smart baseball guy who notices a lot, and knows a lot of people in the game. So it's really great, and I love to. I love to disagree with him on television, because we get a good, we always get a good thing going. But yeah, some people you don't know as well, and you try to get to know and be loose with, but that can be a challenge as well. And it's all part of it. It's all part of making the show as good as you can make it, by being receptive to an argument, or receptive to a moment of camaraderie, whatever it is, that you can sort of start building that kind of relationship.
Yeah, I always felt like SNY provided us our first real true New York network, and right on down the list. I used to love watching The Wheelhouse. Brandon Tierney is my guy. Went to Marist. We used to love watching Loudmouths.
Yeah, Loudmouth is great.
Adam Shine moved on, worked for the NFL, and gives me a nice little segue, because somebody very, very close to you has also been at the NFL for a very, very long time. So why don't you tell our listeners who that special somebody is, and how you met them?
Well, backdrop here is usually her home set, for when she makes TV appearances from home. So that's why there's like an NFL book back there. I'd love to claim the Emmy that's back there somewhere too, but that's hers. But we have been married since 2001. We met at the Miami Herald. She worked there too. and that's how we got to know each other. And then after I had moved to New York, she actually got a job at Newsday. I was working at the Daily News at the time, and so she moved to New York, and that's where we, started, became an item, started going out, fell in love, got married, had a daughter, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and she is great at her job. Before she worked for the NFL, she worked at the New York Times. After her stint at Newsday, so she is in the middle of a wonderful career. She's great on TV. She's a total natural, and she really knows a lot about football. And it's funny because people ask us about a two sports journalist household. And we really do have some of these conversations at home, that you might have on a Loudmouths or whatever. I'm a big Giants fan, so she's got to talk me off the ledge about the Giants all the time, and especially recently. Yeah, yeah. So it's great, and we've always, there's always a ball game on TV here. It seems like. So it's really a great thing.
You and Judy are an absolute power couple. So I'm wondering, in 2001, how many of your fellow colleagues, I mean, this must have been a big time industry event when you're getting married at the Lotos Club. And you get your article in the New York Times as well. But was it just like a who's who of people working in local news? Because it seemed like, big time event.
A lot of good friends from here and from the Herald, that we we're both friends with. Yeah, it was a great it was a great event. We had a lot of folks there. There was a definite journalism turn to it, which was good. I mean, it's as it should be with with the business that we're in. That's funny. Yeah, that place is great. Every time I walk past there, coming out of Central Park or whatever, the Lotus Club, I'm like, man, oh man, that's where I got married. That's awesome. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Anthony, in your career, what would you say was your I'm right moment? So what we mean by that is a time where you wanted to do something or pursue something. You ask somebody for advice and they say, Anthony, I don't think you should do that. That doesn't sound like a good idea. And you say, you know what? I'm going to do it anyway. And ultimately, you will see why it is that I'm right.
Gosh, I would have to say that, I mean, well, I took a buyout from the Daily News at the end of 2016. And, so presently I'm in addition to my work at SNY, I do some freelance writing. I do some freelance writing still for the Daily News on occasion, and other places, the SNY website included. But that was not an easy decision to make. And the idea of, I mean, I sort of thought the writing might be on the wall. The Daily News was changing, and if I wasn't going to be laid off, then or soon, it would be the next time or the time after that. So I decided to try something. And I wouldn't say there were people who told me no, don't do that, but I think I had an internal conversation with myself, like, you have a job, hey schmuck, you have a job, you're going to leave a job without a job to see what you and, I'm very enabled us to make that call and do it. And it's turned out to be great, to be quite honest with you, because a two sports writer household is a crazy scheduling nightmare.
Yeah.
Like, I think people, the NFL schedule was recently released, and so there's all those stories about how it's made, and you got to get, these 5 people are working on it, and the NASA computers are involved, whatever. And I said, well, that sounds a lot to me. That sounds a lot like navigating 2 sports writer schedules when you have a child.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, what's the next week look like? Well, I'm going to be in Cleveland and then Detroit. Well, you can't go to Detroit because I have to be in Jacksonville. And when I left the Daily News, we eliminated that insanity because I would always be home. I think I've been on one work trip as a freelancer since then. So we always had like a baseline home thing happening once I did that. So it turned out to be a really good move. I'm basically setting my own schedule too, and I'm not getting, I'm not woken up in the middle of the night because so and so made a trade or whatever, and that kind of thing. So that's it all came out good. But I would say that was and I found out pretty quickly, I think, that I was right to do it because it just felt so comfortable. It felt so natural. SNY was giving me opportunities, which I've always been incredibly thankful for. And the website turned into a possibility for me to write for them too, and along with other freelance stuff. So it's been great.
And we thank you for joining us, Anthony. We will continue to read and watch everything that you do with SNY. We appreciate your time. And what we do here is we always give our guests the last words. So if there's anything else you would like to share, if there's anything else you would like to promote, or just to get off your chest, by all means, go ahead and do so. But once again, thanks again for doing this with us.
Thank you for having me, guys. I mean, the one thing I would say is that if you don't pigeonhole yourself in one sort of thing, be open to, I mean, I've been on TV and in the newspaper and all that. So you sort of have to be aware of how to do all these things. Make sure you can write, because that's important, even if you are only on television, or only doing anything. Writing is key in this business, and don't neglect that part of it. And it's, there are plenty of rewards along the way. There's plenty of hard work, but it is ultimately, if you're getting to go to a ballpark, that's a good way to start the day.
Absolutely. Very well said. Anthony, thank you so much for your time. So that's going to do here for this episode of You Know I'm Right. For our very special guest, the Mac Daddy himself, Anthony McCarron, and my co-host, Joe Calabrese. I'm Nick Durst, and this has been You Know I'm Right.